76.6% of 28 million Venezuelans live in extreme poverty this year, up from 67.7% in 2020, despite the country having the world's largest oil reserves. Statistics show that in 2020, the total oil reserves will be 304 billion barrels, surpassing Saudi Arabia with 298 billion barrels and Canada's 168 billion barrels. This is according to a survey reported in the National Survey of Living Conditions, ENCOVI. Venezuelans have lost their purchasing power and are unable to earn money, not because of laziness, but because there are no jobs in the country. The public sector can only pay a salary of $3 per month, while opportunities in the private sector are very few. This year is the 9th year of economic turmoil, coupled with political instability, which has made critical basic goods such as food and medicine difficult to obtain. So, in this video, we will see how a country so rich in oil resources, namely Venezuela, experienced the biggest economic crisis in history. Keep watching. Venezuela and oil. The wealth enjoyed by Venezuela was after a large oil well was discovered in 1922, namely the Maracaibo Basin. However, oil revenues are siphoned off by corrupt dictatorial leaders, with more than 100 foreign companies allowed to operate in Venezuela. In 1928, Venezuela managed to become the world's second largest oil exporter after the U.S. The government only depends on oil revenue, while the agricultural industry is very limited because the land is monopolized by only a few upper-class families. At that time, the people finally felt the result of real luxury, which was only enjoyed by 20% of the upper class who collected 80% of the national income. In 1958, the dictatorial and corrupt government of Marcos Pérez Jiménez was successfully overthrown, followed by the two largest parties governed together democratically. In the 1950s and 1960s, Venezuela was among the 20 richest countries, if measured by per capita income. Venezuela was the second largest oil producer until the 1960s, and was then replaced by the Soviet Union, the main oil exporter until the early 1970s when it was replaced by Saudi Arabia. The government at that time was able to provide financial loans with low interest rates, free public facilities, and ensure a high exchange rate value to allow imported goods for the people's needs to be brought in. Venezuelans were enjoying a comfortable life with an abundance of oil, and politicians were also growing in power. In 1973, the OPEC Oil Association imposed an embargo on the U.S., and Venezuela profited greatly with oil prices increasing up to 4 times. However, at the end of the 1980s, the price of oil declined, causing the national debt to increase and the economy began to decline. Venezuela ended up having to get help from the IMF and made changes in economic policies such as withdrawing subsidies to the people, which caused the price of goods and oil to rise sharply. The situation got worse, and on February 27, 1989, there was a big riot known as Caracazo, due to the people who were frustrated by the economic turmoil and the increase in the price of goods. About 2,000 people were killed in tensions, with security forces in the city of Caracas. Venezuela under Hugo Chavez, 1999 to 2013. Venezuela cannot be separated from the name of Hugo Chavez, the former president who ruled from 1999 to 2013. During the early 1990s, the economic reforms that the government tried to do were not successful because the people could not accept that Venezuela, which used to be luxurious, was now in a situation of economic decline. Hugo Chavez won the election in 1999 after he was imprisoned for 2 years and received amnesty. He was a supporter of socialist ideology and reformed the way of administration by creating a new constitution to enable the country's social and economic policies are developed for all citizens by using the country's oil revenue. For the next decade, Hugo Chavez spent heavily on education, health, medicine, and housing for his 30 million citizens. Oil revenue was used to eliminate the social class differences of the people, and poverty was successfully reduced from 70% in 1999 to 30% in 2013. Venezuela became a formal socialist country when the government bought all important private companies, including telecommunications companies, as well as the largest commercial bank, Banco de Venezuela, in 2009. The government also fully controls the price of essential goods, causing business operators to stop production due to lack of profit. However, Hugo Chavez neglected spending in one of the most important aspects, namely the management of oil production facilities, which caused oil production to decline. Dutch disease, national economic dependence on a single resource. The term Dutch disease was introduced by the economist in 1977 to describe the economic weakness that occurred in the Netherlands when the abundant natural gas resources found in the country had caused economic problems, as the country's income only depended on one variable commodity source in the market. 99% of Venezuela's export revenue is from oil sales, but investment and maintenance for oil production activities is very little. Oil production has been steadily declining during Hugo Chavez's rule. In Venezuela, when the price of oil increases, it allows goods to be imported in large quantities to meet the needs that the domestic manufacturing sector could not provide. However, when the price of oil began to plummet, the national income was not enough to buy imported goods, and the supply of necessities began to be limited. Its production once reached up to 3.8 million barrels a day in the 1970s, but became around hundreds of thousands of barrels a day. Starting in 2014, the price of oil began to fall sharply from $100 per barrel to below $30 per barrel in 2016, causing Venezuela to begin to experience an economic crisis and political instability as well. Venezuela is also burdened with a lot of debt due to huge spending by the previous government. Hyperinflation. Imagine a situation where a consumer wants to make a purchase in a store, but all the available items are not marked with a price tag. This is because the price of the goods may change within an hour after that, or it may happen that there are no goods to buy, including food and medicine. Hyperinflation is the rate of inflation that occurs above 50% in the month and rises very quickly. The economic turmoil caused banks to start printing money aggressively, thus losing its real value. The price of goods rose sharply, with people without a source of income and no foreign investment coming in. In addition, more and more people are losing faith in a country's currency and will sell it, also worsening the situation. Due to lack of confidence in the country's own currency, the government and people may end up choosing a more stable foreign currency. People also choose to do a barter system to get food and basic goods. The hyperinflation rate increased from 9.02% to 10 million% since 2018. The economic contraction has reached 65% since 2013 to 2019. The Venezuelan government has taken steps to remove 5 zeros from the bolivar currency, reducing its value by 95%. This is the largest currency devaluation in modern world history. Before the currency change was made, the price of 2.4 kilograms of chicken was equivalent to 14.6 million bolivars, and buyers had to carry the equivalent of 73 centimeters high of 1,000 bolivars. Current government of Venezuela. Venezuela is led by President Nicolas Maduro, who was handpicked by Hugo Chavez before his death from cancer in 2013. Today, the political situation is very unstable, and Maduro is accused of not being transparent in the elections held in 2018 and won on the factor of military support alone. The election was considered illegitimate by the US and several European Union countries, which also led to economic sanctions against Venezuela. Although disliked by some Western powers, China, Russia, and Cuba have helped maintain President Maduro's power by lending money, weapons, and political management. China and Russia have provided loans and investments worth hundreds of billions of US dollars since the last decade. China was able to provide very large loans, which also surprised the IMF. Venezuela, on the other hand, exported oil at a cheaper price to China, with a total of 350,000 barrels per day at the beginning of 2019. Despite the warning from the US, this export activity continues with the cooperation of oil companies from Russia. In conclusion, the socialist ideology brought by President Hugo Chavez is not the cause of the problems Venezuela is currently facing, but corruption and inefficient administration causing a country abundant with oil to collapse. If it has a stable and strong government, Venezuela, which is on top of the largest black gold deposit, could develop just like Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Thank you for watching.